Hello world, it's Bird of Prey 5, Qapla. So I watched episode 6 of Star Trek Picard titled The Impossible Box, and let's start with a quick spoiler-free discussion. Despite not a lot actually happening in this episode, it kept my attention, and even Mamo Prey's attention, who wanted to do nothing but sleep after waking up at 2 a.m. to help me prepare for Anti-Trigger's interview with Manu Intarabi, the actor who played Ichib on Star Trek Voyager, but not on Star Trek Picard. It was an awesome interview, and I'm including a link on the off chance you haven't seen it yet. We both watched this episode waiting, hoping something big would happen. As has been pointed out by Jurati and others at this point, we, the audience, know far more than the characters, and I feel this imbalance makes us believe a correction is coming, some scene that changes everything, but it never came. There was a small surprise as to how things worked out at the end, but there was really never any doubt things would work out, of course. The real problem wasn't the ending of the episode, it was everything before it. I could skip 90% except for all the problems I will need to bring up. We're back to a split score for this one. As a sci-fi episode, I'll give it a 6. As Mamo Prey says, it kept her attention, but she enjoyed the first few episodes much more, and I would agree. As a Trek episode, I can give this a 4.5 out of 10, and I feel I'm being generous. For those who have seen my video on the body count in Picard through episode 5, we add at least 3 more people killed on screen in this episode, and countless promise to die off screen as the episode ends. Life is cheap in Star Trek Picard. Phasers set to stun are the exception, no longer the rule. It's not even people getting killed so often that turns me off. It's that people get killed and no one seems to care. So into the spoilers we go. This episode begins with Soji as a young child walking down a dark hallway during a thunderstorm. At the end is a bright light behind a partially open door. It's her father's lab and he's working on something, but she can't see it. The flowers they talked about in the first episode, a hybrid her dad supposedly created, are in the way. Soji wakes up as her dad yells her name. We find out Soji was in bed with Narek at the time, who realizes she had a dream or a nightmare. He wants to talk to her about it. She gives few details. He pretends he gets offended when she asks about his true name and leaves. Apparently, Romulans have a secret true name they only share with people they love the most, because of course they do, just like all Romulans have fake front doors on their houses. Back on the La Sirena, Dr. Jurati is telling Picard that Maddox's heart simply gave out, and that's why he died. We know he really died because she essentially pulled the plug. It's never addressed if the EMH who witnessed most of it will ever need to be reprogrammed, or what happened to the body of Maddox. As Jurati talks to Picard about what Maddox disclosed, Elnor invites himself to take a seat. Picard confirms Maddox said Soji was on the artifact, which must be explained to Elnor as the former Borg Cube. Elnor can tell Picard doesn't want to go, to which Picard confirms via an extreme close-up. Jurati wonders why Maddox would send Soji there. Maddox said before he died, Daj was sent to Earth and Soji sent to the Cube to search for the real reason synthetics got banned. Jurati surprised Picard by knowing all the details about his assimilation. Like all the details. Despite her saying it is required reading in her line of work, and her seemingly naive question,
maybe they've changed.
I'm starting to think Jurati might be part Borg. I can't explain it, but they seem to be hinting at it. After giving a short history of the Borg, Picard delivers one of his most memorable lines of the episode.
They don't change. They metastasize.
Picard excuses himself, and Elnor comments to Jurati that Picard can't see she's haunted by something she'd like to forget, to which Jurati gives him what I can only assume is the stare of death before walking away. Picard returns to his Vineyard office hologram, where he is clearly very disturbed at the prospects of going to the Borg Cube. He space Googles the artifact, treaty, and the Borg, which returns a bunch of images, including a young Hugh from TNG and an older Hugh, as he now appears on the artifact. The best scene of the entire episode happens as the camera pans around the transparent display and the image of Picard as Locutus gets superimposed over his much older face. Picard reaches for the Borg implants that have long since been removed. We finally get to the opening credits, which is a little later than usual. But this episode is the longest Picard episode yet, 10 minutes longer than most, at 54:37, including the previously on and preview for next week. After the credits, we're back on the ship, which we're told is now in the former neutral zone. Rios is shirtless and playing with a soccer ball, seemingly alone, when Dr. Jurati comes out because she couldn't sleep. A few meaningless lines of dialogue later and they're making out. Dr. Jurati confesses she has a superpower. She can tell she's making a mistake as she makes it. Rios earnestly offers to listen to what's bothering her. She says she feels hollow, hopeless, lonely, and afraid, but banging Rios will help for a few hours, so off they go to do the horizontal tango. Jurati mentions she's never slept with a captain of anything before, just in case we weren't absolutely sure her intentions.
Yes, Captain.
I have made it with a woman. Inform the men.
Back on the cube/artifact, Narek is talking with his sister while working with some kind of Romulan puzzle box. Presumably the impossible box the episode is titled after. Narek says he can exploit Soji via her dreams. The sister isn't immediately convinced, but Narek shows the sister the only way to open the impossible box is with patience, something the sister never had. He makes his point and she relents and lets him continue working with Soji in his way. Next we go to the bridge of the La Sirena, where Rios fills us in that they'll be in Romulan space in just a few hours, and he is confident Picard has a plan. The only thing that will work is Picard getting diplomatic credentials to visit the Borg Reclamation project, as the treaty stipulates Romulans must allow such visits, and Picard happens to know the director, who we know is Hugh. Getting the credentials is difficult, though. Picard apparently can't ask himself, even though it sounds like a relatively small favor compared to asking for a starship and a crew. They need to get Raffi, who has relapsed and is high and drunk, to call in a favor. Raffi talks to a captain who initially said she couldn't give Picard the diplomatic credentials to actually give them. The captain is very reluctant, but gets Picard a 24-hour pass for him and him alone. She also tells Raffi never to call her again. Raffi loses what is perhaps her last friend at Starfleet over this, but in the most cringy scene of the episode, Picard claps for Raffi's acting performance. Raffi is led back to her quarters by Rios and is almost in tears from the exchange, and Picard clapping is totally out of place. I'm also pretty sure in this scene the writers mistakenly used Federation when they mean Starfleet, but I can't prove it. It's a mistake I've made myself from time to time, but should never get past editing in a show like this. Back on the Borg Cube, Narek and Soji are walking and talking. Soji admits to falling asleep while calling her mom on the phone. Narek asks if that happens often, to which Soji can't give a solid answer. Narek tells Soji that he has the records of the daily calls with her mom, and every one lasts exactly 70 seconds. No more, no less. Back on the ship is the scene that will be cut if they ever need to edit this episode to fit on broadcast television. Rios puts Raffi to bed, and Raffi admits she has a son, something she presumably never told Rios despite their long friendship. Raffi ends up passing out, and Rios leaves with the half-finished bottle of booze. Cut to the cube where Soji made an unexpected call to her mom. Soji starts to get tired and the mom suggests she sleep. Soji actively tries not to sleep, even tries stabbing herself with a pen or something, but ultimately can't resist. The La Sirena finally reaches the artifact as the diplomatic pass comes in. It confirms only Picard will be allowed to access the cube, and Jurati is noticeably annoyed she won't be able to get on the cube, but denies it and says she's actually relieved. No one on this side of the screen believes you, Jurati. At least I hope not. Elnor is also pissed he can't go with Picard to protect him. Picard gives Elnor specific orders not to leave the ship under any circumstances, so of course he will. Back to see Soji waking up after her phone call with her mom. She starts pulling apart her quarters to get to old photographs, paper photographs, mind you. Even today, paper photographs are basically gone. Old paper journals she wrote in, stuffed animals, everything she has from her past, and uses some kind of quantum dating device. Every item she scans comes back as being 37 months old. Even her necklace, which should be much older. She knows something is very wrong. Picard transports to the cube to specific coordinates that were provided by the Romulans. Of course, this is a spooky and empty part of the cube, where there are walkways reminiscent of the Death Star with no railings and potential for long falls. Picard immediately gets a PTSD-like flashback and almost falls, but two former Borg grab him. Picard thinks he's being assimilated again until Hugh finally arrives and explains they were just preventing Picard from falling. Picard looks again at the Borg, who look horrible. Their implants have been removed, but very little has been done to fix their bodies, which are scarred all over. Hugh might be the first character genuinely happy to see Picard, and for the briefest moment we got a feeling of friends reuniting, something I'd hoped we'd have seen far more this season. However, one must wonder why Hugh couldn't be there a minute earlier to meet Picard and save him the trauma of arriving alone. Hugh promises to help Picard in any way he can. He shows off the Borg Reclamation project, and Picard is impressed that so many Borg are being recovered. Hugh says ex-Bs, aka ex-Borg, or former Borg as Hugh explains it, are still the most hated people in the galaxy. Hugh says Picard's advocacy for a free Borg would go a long way. While Hugh can come and go as he pleases since he's a Federation citizen, the rest of the ex-Borg are under Romulan jurisdiction, and as Hugh says, they simply serve a Romulan queen instead of a Borg one. Hugh asks how he can help, and Picard starts off saying he's looking for someone who appears to be human, from Earth. Only then does he say the name Soji, to which Hugh instantly recognizes as Dr. Soji Ashur. Why didn't Picard start with her name? Why say she appears to be human and risk tipping anyone off she isn't? Why does he have to add from Earth? Are humans from other planets really that different? These are all useless questions, of course, so let's move on. Back in Soji's quarters, she's showing Narek how everything she has is only 37 months old. Narek asks her how she can explain it, but she can't. Narek says someone may have implanted memories and suggests they can find out more by analyzing her dream using a Romulan meditation technique called Zahl Makh. Soji recognizes this as something that is taboo to share with non-Romulans, but Narek says that is all the more reason to try it. Jumping to the La Sirena, Rios is bringing Raffi a cup of coffee as she wakes up. Rios tells Raffi she owes him 2 strips of latinum, which I believe is the first mention of latinum in the series. Apparently, Raffi had bet Rios, the other sister, meaning Soji, would already be dead. Rios says Picard confirmed the sister was alive. Raffi starts to worry what the Romulans could want from a synth. Back on the cube, Narek and Soji are walking through a new part of the cube. Romulans are looking at Soji like she doesn't belong there. Narek goes up to a guard and asks if the room is free. The guard says in Romulan, it's not for round ears. Narek responds in Romulan that the guard will lose his rank if he doesn't open the door. Narek and Soji enter a room full of candles set up for the Romulan Zahl Makh ritual. Narek tells Soji he feels safe in this place, a safety he doesn't feel outside or even in her quarters. To prove this, he tells her his true name, which I can't pronounce, but it's on screen. I don't know, something like that. Mind you, this safe place has a glass door with a Romulan guard outside, able to see everything going on inside, as opposed to Soji's quarters, which were actually private. You'd think Soji would question this logic, but she doesn't. So she begins the ritual where she basically enters her dream even though she's wide awake. Apparently following a maze painted on the floor allows her to control her dreams while still awake. I guess you have to believe. We soon see that Narek's sister is monitoring everything, and Narek knows it as well. Every time Soji gets scared or wants to stop, Narek tells her she reaches some new point and throws out some Romulan term for where she is along the path. Long story short, it's the same dream as earlier. Middle of the night, thunderstorm outside, she's approaching her dad's lab. This time, however, Soji sees herself on the table in the lab. It's her as an adult, but it's also a wooden doll in pieces. She notes the lab is illuminated by a skylight, but it's night, so how is that possible? The last thing Narek asks her to do is look up at the skylight. Not only does it confirm that it's nighttime, but she can clearly see 2 blood-red moons. However, there's a thunderstorm going on, so how does she see anything at all? The sky should be covered with clouds. The entire scene is a poorly written mess, whose only purpose was to give Narek's sister a good lead on where the homeworld is. Narek's sister says all she needs to do is to find a planet with 2 red moons and constant electrical storms. This makes zero sense, as there's nothing to suggest the thunderstorms were constant as opposed to just a passing storm. And who is to say there aren't more moons? Only a small part of the sky was visible out the skylight. Regardless, Narek is officially done with Soji. He gives her a last kiss before leaving and locking her in the room. She begins banging on the door to get out, but Narek and the guard do nothing. Narek left his impossible box inside, and it slowly opens to reveal a poisonous red gas. Soji begins to smash through the floor with her bare hands. Again, not something that should be possible for an organic synth. Human hands and bones simply cannot break through the metal of a Borg Cube, but she has no problem, and she jumps through the hole. Narek alerts security. Picard and Hugh went to Soji's quarters and let themselves in when she didn't answer. Picard looks at all the old photographs she has laying everywhere, including a photo of Soji and Dash that she ripped in half. Picard believes she has activated and asks Hughes to track her. At first, he couldn't find her, but once she jumped through the hole in the floor, they find her, and Picard and Hugh head towards her. On the La Sirena, they can tell Picard is in trouble, but can't contact him. Picard and Hugh are running to intercept Soji. A random ex-Borg recognizes Picard and calls him Locutus, but they can't slow down. They make it to a common area just as Soji falls through the ceiling. Picard tells Soji to come with him. He's a friend of her father's. She hesitates, but eventually follows Picard and Hugh. Hugh knows a place they can go. It's behind a secret wall, and Picard recognizes it as the Queen's cell, even though he'd never been there himself. Hugh says it's the same for him. He knew what it was, despite never being there. Hugh activates a new piece of Borg technology that Picard had never seen before, a spatial trajector. It can instantly transport people a great distance. Soji somehow knows the limit is 40,000 light-years, which is tremendous. Remember, when Voyager was pulled into the Delta Quadrant, that was 70,000 light-years. So 40,000 light-years would let them go just about anywhere in the known galaxy. Hugh explains the technology came after the Borg assimilated the Sikarians. The Sikarians were a race we met in Star Trek Voyager in the Delta Quadrant. They had the ability to transport thousands of light-years, but in Voyager the tech could only be used on their planet because of conditions unique to the planet. It would seem the Borg learned how to use it without the need for the planet. The Voyager episode in question is Prime Factors, which is Season 1, Episode 10. The implications are quite disturbing. If the Borg extended their territory all the way to where Voyager was in Season 1, that would be a vast expansion of their territory in the Delta Quadrant. Picard contacts La Sirena and tells them they found a way off the Borg Cube, and they should rendezvous with Picard at a planet called Nepothene. Raffi and Rios are confused about how that is possible, but Picard assures them to just meet them there. Rios looks around the ship and notices the kid, aka Elnor, is nowhere to be seen. About that time, Elnor appears on the Borg Cube and kills 3 Romulans with his sword, bringing the body count this season to 33. Picard tells Elnor he told him to stay on the ship, and in his absolute candor way, Elnor simply says he didn't listen, to which Picard says thank you. Picard does not complain about him killing 3 Romulans at the time, when a phaser on stun would have been enough. I guess if you kill 1 Romulan, Picard complains, but if you kill 3, he thanks you. Despite the fact the spatial trajector can move multiple people, Elnor decides to stay behind on the cube to buy Picard more time. Picard and Soji step through the device and disappear. Hugh needs a few minutes to wipe the logs and hide the room again so the Romulans don't get their hands on this technology, and asks Elnor if he can hold the Romulans off. Elnor says he won't need a few minutes. As the door closes behind them, we hear Elnor say, "Please, my friends, choose to live." And the episode ends. We find out from the preview that Nepothene is apparently the planet Riker is on, so next week's episode looks to be a lot more interesting than this one. It's ironic that this is our longest episode to date, when it could easily have been the shortest with very little being lost. As I said early in this review, the biggest problem with this show is the devaluing of life. Killing people is no longer a big deal, and is acceptable even when non-lethal options are available. Writers literally mistaking the Federation for Starfleet, Picard clapping at a very inappropriate moment. I almost thought he was suffering from dementia already. In one scene, he holds out Dahj's necklace and his hand is shaking so much. I wonder if that was intentional, or just the best he can do at his age. I also question how Elnor could have beamed to the Borg Cube. It's clear Elnor knew very little about anything other than his sword. My only guess is Jurati secretly beamed him over, since she learned how to use the transporter in episode 5, but that remains to be confirmed. We do know she is perfectly capable of lying, something she initially told Picard she was very bad at. I know a lot of people like this episode. I can't say I'm one. I admit it kept my interest, even kept me entertained, but this episode continues to eat away at the best traits of Star Trek. Eventually they will run out of ideals to sacrifice. I hope beyond hope that bringing Riker and Troi into next episode will somehow restore Picard onto a more Trek-friendly path. If you've enjoyed this review, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I just officially hit 1,800 subscribers, and though the number might be slightly higher or lower by the time you see this, it would mean a lot if you can click that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notifications of new videos and almost daily live streams. Please share the video. It's a great way to help the channel as well. Check out birdofprey5.com for other links, donations, merch, and more. Qapla all, and take care.